So for you guys, just quick, the introduction is, so Julia is the CEO and co-founder, or CEO and founder of Everly Health, a digital healthcare company that does remote diagnosis and managing of recurrent health conditions. I understand you started this out of frustration with the cost and the difficulty of just doing regular lab works. At their last raise in 2022, the valuation is $3.2 billion, and she has about 300 employees. Fortune named her one of the 15 most powerful women in startups. To her right is Omair Tariq. He's the founder and CEO of Cart.com, a unified commerce, tech, and logistics provider with 6,000 customers, 1,500 employees, and $1.2 billion valuation. Previously, you were at homedepot.com.
Yeah, we built a company, blinds.com, and we sold it to Home Depot in 2014.
And then what I love is that Texas Monthly profiled him here, talking about his hawk and jewelry at the Houston flea market and saying that he's now taking on Amazon. Nice. And then many of you know Brett Hurt, who I call the godfather of Culturati. The idea for Culturati came out when we were at lunch one day. Can't remember if Jan Lindelof was with us or if it was just the two of us.
That one was just the two of us, and we were eating at a place that no longer exists. Do you remember? It was on Barton Springs.
Right.
What was that place called? It like stayed at Magnolia.
Right.
Yeah.
So Brett's a serial entrepreneur. Many companies, but he took Bizarre Voice public in 2012.
2012, yeah.
2012, and is now building data.world. Has 100 employees, about half of them in Austin. And what does data.world do?
It's pretty geeky. It gets really geeky real fast. But the best way to think about it now in this age of AI is we're building a digital brain of all of a company's data, which are their facts, to interact with any large language model. And it's a much more exciting way to explain it than the past way, because now everybody gets the importance of having their data to plug into an LLM.
And Brett and his wife, Deborah, have invested in, I know over 100 companies and 40 plus venture capital partnerships, and are very, very involved in lots of philanthropic initiatives, particularly if you play tennis at the J, which are named by endowed by the Hertz. Listen, let's get started. Brett and I talked after the last summit, and we talked about the innovativeness, the creativeness that comes out of the entrepreneurial community, and that extends into culture. You guys have the ability to try a lot of things, the necessity to try a lot of things, and it's kind of a scrappy business. Brett, I'm going to start with Brett's favorite question, but any of you guys can answer it. What's the number one thing that you've implemented that has contributed to culture and the company performance?
So for me, so one thing I would just say is that nothing defines your culture than who you hire, how you fire, and who you promote. Those are the three things. So let's focus on how you hire, because everybody says they hire the best people, et cetera. And so we were trying to derive a process at my prior company, Bizarre Voice, to put people through a kind of a passion test, if you will. And my company before that, Core Metrics, for example, salespeople would work out 50% of the time. And when I talked with other software as a service CEOs, they said that's just the way it is. It's a numbers game. Just put more people through the funnel. And Brant Barden and I, who was my co-founder for Bizarre Voice, we said, we don't want to do that. That's like horrible for them. It's horrible for us. There's a big opportunity cost on all sides. Yeah, and so we derived this test for every role at Bizarre Voice, starting with our first ever employee, where we would put them through a pressure cooker. So we'd get to Friday and we'd say, hey, everybody here wants to hire you. When we first started out, it was just me and Brant. But as we grew to over 850 people. But we're like, everybody here wants to hire you. There's just one more thing we need you to do. We need you to come in on Monday or Tuesday, and let's say it's a salesperson, but everybody got a assignment like this, and we need you to present to us like we're a prospect. We'll stay enrolled the whole time. You'll have 45 minutes to present, and then we'll have 15 minutes of Q&A. Good luck. And we won't give them any materials at all. We wanted it actually to be very ambiguous, because we wanted to see, like, do they ask questions? Do they reach out to people? Like, how do they deal with that? We're trying to hire the self-starter. And it is forced on a weekend, because if we got an RFP from Procter & Gamble, we would drop everything. If they're like, hey, we need this by Tuesday, we'd drop everything. So we're trying to simulate that. And on salespeople, we're right 80% of the time. So only 20% of the time did they not work out. So we busted through that curve. But our engineers were like that, et cetera. And Bazaar Voice was rated the #1 place to work in Austin when it was small, then #1 when it was medium, #1 when it was large. But we went from 0 to over 100 million sales and a $1 billion IPO in 6 years. And a big part of that was having the raw material, the people foundation of people that were really, really passionate and really would drop everything because of that passion. Like, if you invented the cure for cancer and that was your life's work, you would not be meek about that. It'd be like, I invented the cure for cancer. You'd be like, this is amazing, right? I'm going to save so many lives. And we wanted people that felt that way in working at Bazaar Voice. So we do the same thing at data.world.
So your #1.
That's
initiative
#1,
that
yep.
contributes to performance. Omair?
Yep.
What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think we are all probably going to have to build up on what he said, right? Because at the end of the day, the DNA of any company are the people. But I'll actually talk a little bit about the second thing he said, which is you hire people, the right people, you fire really fast, and then you promote even faster. We're just a 3-year-old company, right? So we're very young, and we went from an idea to almost 2,000 people in 3 years, which is a lot of fun, and it's not a lot of fun. And I think what we concluded, at least in the last 3 years, is that it's really hard to get the right people hired in a very short period of time. So what you really have to get better at is managing them and actually managing them out if they're not working out in a respectful, human way. And because during an interview process, even if it's 6 hours and 17 people, it's really hard to identify the imposters. And there's probably a lot we can learn from Brett, what you've implemented in your past companies. But what we found is just bringing people on that appear to be good, and then leaving them into the wild and see how they can execute, but then very quickly identifying those that can't, really help keep the people in the company that are completely obsessed with your vision and your customers and ultimately drive your culture. Our net promoter scores for a 3-year-old company now are like at a 7, which it's not a 10, but it's not a -4, which it was in the first year we started the company. And I think this strategy of making sure you don't have the wrong people is almost as important as having the right people on the bus.
How long does it take you to identify the wrong people, and what are the signs?
Yeah, I mean, look, in some cases it's as little as 2 weeks, but the median probably is about 3 months. And it's usually the ones that want to see what their title is and where their office is and who their admin is and how big their team is and how many people they want to hire before they talk about how much value they're going to drive for the company and how they're obsessed with whatever our customers are trying to do. Even the questions people ask about in the first 60 days, you kind of understand, are they selfish about their own selves, or are they selfless about the company's vision, and you want to just keep the selfless ones, right? So median is about 3 months.
Yeah. There's a chapter in my book about those people.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Julia?
Yep.
So I'll go a little bit of a different direction and add on a little bit to what they both said. Also, Brett is one of our angel investors, so in addition
Thank
to
you. Thank you for allowing me.
bringing me here.
She's
I think
amazing.
he has done a tremendous job fostering the Austin ecosystem as well.
You're here.
So for me, I've gone through a variety of different chapters. I founded my company about 9 years ago. And, you know, I think as potentially many founders, or especially female founders, may feel, I was constantly kind of moved by the winds of whatever was being told to me by what was popular in culture, employee management, et cetera. And so I really got really far apart from my authentic self as a leader. And really because, frankly, I think my authentic self was somewhat unpopular. Whether or not my style is something that is perceived as, you know, what the employee base wants it to be, I found I was really damaging the culture by not leaning into my authentic leadership style, because I can only be one type of leader. And of course, there's a range. You can learn, you can grow, you can flex, you can augment where your gaps are, but you can't fundamentally become a different person. And so I'll give you an example. When I hire executives, if they want someone who is going to empower them, get out of their way, respect them, but dig, confirm, trust but verify, and make sure that they're delivering where they're supposed to be, you'll find executives that have worked for me. Half my executive team has worked for me for at least 6 years. On the other hand, and neither one is better or worse, on the other hand, if you are an executive who needs a lot of positive reinforcement, a real extroverted CEO, a cheerleader, someone who is going to really be that, what I would call really charismatic, very outward-facing, very personality-driven CEO, they just don't get what they need from me. And I have found myself over the years constantly try to adapt to that, and all that does is make it worse for everybody, including myself. And so I have really gone back to, in the last couple of years, leaning into my leadership style, what makes the company great for what it is, and also knowing and trying to work with people before bringing them in on if that's going to be a fit for them or not. Because if it is, it's like magic. And if it's not, you almost immediately know. I would say within 4 weeks, at least at the executive level, you kind of know if it's not clicking. And again, that has a lot of personal responsibility on me. And every time I get it wrong, I say, what did I miss? What did I do wrong? What could I have done better? Because you're never really at an executive level. I'm never hiring a person who's not a good executive, ever. It's really, is it the right fit, the right timeline, the right role, and the right leadership team for this person to be successful? And so I put that onus on myself to really say, where was I not clear, and what did I get wrong? The other piece that I would offer on being able to manage people and performance manage them up or out is what you'll find is if you really make promotion decisions based on 10Xers that are 10Xing values in your company, what values are they living? How are they showing up internally? What are they demonstrating for the rest of the team? That will get you far more than any other move you can make. And so that also goes the other way, which is if you know that someone is not living the company values, if they're negative, if they're a bully, whatever it might be, even if it's on the fringes, you have to get them out of the company. Doesn't matter how critical they are, you have to get them out. And so I think really being black and white about that can provide an accelerant of positive values building and positive culture. If you can really hold to those principles. And it's really hard as CEO when, if you know that there's a toxic person in your organization, but say they have a lot of tribal knowledge, say they have a lot of specific subject matter expertise, it's very hard for me to talk to a leader and say, hey, that person that you already might feel like you're drowning and we have to exit that person. It's really hard to want to push that lever, and yet you have to help them see ahead and think about how much better their team and the organization will be when they can get someone who's really values aligned.
Awesome, thank you. I'm just looking at the time, and these are all good, but I'm gonna skip around a little bit. There's a lot of pushback on DE&I today. From our conversations, I know there's also a commitment to diversity and inclusion. So which of you want to address where we find ourselves with DE&I today?
I mean, I'm happy to jump in. I think it's really important. The best aspects of America are the fact that we have such a diversity of restaurants, literature, academic institutions, companies, and I love that about America, and you really can see that anytime you travel throughout the world, like how that makes us such an amazing country, and I want to have that inside of my company. And I do also believe in a meritocracy. So the way that I do that is I'm very deliberate about the pipeline. And when I see CEOs saying, I just can't hire enough blank engineers or whatever the category is, I say, well, where are you looking? And I actually dedicated the concluding chapter of my book, The Entrepreneur's Essentials, to this. It's chapter 23. And there are lots of meetups for, Black engineers, for Hispanic engineers, for all types of, groups of women, et cetera. And if you're not showing up there, then, and you're only hiring people like you that are convenient, you have to work a little bit harder, but the payoff is massive. You'll have much better performance as a company. You'll be like the best of America, and your ideas will be much more creative. And so I really think we're at a critical time in the nation, and actually this week in particular was really rubbed me raw. I don't know if you saw this, Eugene, but they gutted the DEI department at UT Austin. They let go of 60 people, and one of my friends there is...
Mandated by the Texas legislature.
Yeah, and so they're worried about kind of the anti-woke, legislator, like really cracking down on them. They're a public institution. It really pissed me off, and so we've got to be really deliberate in fighting for the best of America to continue. And as entrepreneurs, we can lead by example on that. And that's why I dedicated the concluding chapter of my book to this topic.
Patrick? Patrick, raise your hand. So Patrick from Royal Bank of Canada, he's probably on a compliance call, but he was talking in the
As bankers are.
Yeah, he was I was at his breakout session with Stephen, and he talked about how, although the national borders kind of gave them some protection from U.S. banks, but that with fintech, that's off, because there are no national borders. And so that Royal Bank of Canada decided we must innovate. And how are we going to become, startup innovation? They're going and hiring from diverse colleges, hiring diverse disciplines, hiring musicians and engineers to come in and be traders. And they're establishing these metrics for creativity, collaboration, and innovation in all the criteria for promotion and bonuses. So it just shows the value there. Yeah. Julia, I have been citing what you told me. I don't even think, it was just the way you said it. I want to talk about place and how we're dealing with place at the companies and whether people show up at the place or remote or hybrid. But you made a statement the other day that was that we get to reinvent the workplace. And I think a lot of us in the room have been saying we have to figure out one of these existing models. It just flipped this as an opportunity. So talk a bit about place and for Everly.
Yeah, I think for Everly specifically, and I do often find this is culturally driven by the founder or the CEO. For Everly specifically, we believe in-person work and community is really important. And so we have been working very hard over the last 2 years to bring people back together after having completely gone remote and hired remotely and nationally over the course of the pandemic. I think it feels like a bit of this teeth-pulling exercise nationally right now because nobody really feels good about the model. Whether it's hybrid, whether it's all remote, whether everybody's in an office, it doesn't really seem that anything is grounded in a strategy that is working or that is broadly adopted. And so when we think about it for us, we look at what teams make sense to collaborate in person. How do we direct hiring that way? How do we help gradually morph the organization, not make any sudden moves, because we think we do have a high-performing team, but over time, how can we have certain functions that will be required to be in office? And for us, that means Chicago, New York, or Austin. And so that started with me. I mean, I had a couple of roles that were turning over reporting to me, and I would only hire in Austin. And that was a harder search. It took longer time, and I had to relocate executives, but it was critical for these roles that we were able to kind of set the standard moving forward. And so for us, it is starting to work well. The last piece I will say is that we are actually entirely flipping, we're moving out of downtown high-rise into a more community-based space that has outdoor space dedicated to us, a pickleball court, a cafe, places, a coffee shop. I was trying to push the landlord for a barista. I know. I was like trying to push for a paid barista. They didn't go for it. So I was like, but it'd be so fun, but that didn't work. So, but got most of the things we needed. And so we're really able to bring people back together in a place that is still flexible and has flexible hours, but it's a place where they feel like they could really build community. So we're going to lean into that. It will work for us. I think you have to be comfortable as a leader taking a stand for the culture that you think the company needs to build. And what we say is, now when we hire, we actually find people want to be in an office. If there are people who are unable to accommodate that, then we are able to work with them over a period of time and make sure that they land in a good place for them. We also are flexible with childcare. I mean, there's a lot of things you have to bring into the mix that helps you build a diverse workforce and is essential to that. But we found it actually is a good differentiator for us, whereas like 12 months ago, it was still really trending negative to have any sort of in-person requirement, and I think it's now viewed as almost a socialization mechanism for a lot of people who haven't been in a work environment often, given if they graduated recently or things like that. So,
Omair, and then we'll go to Q&A so you guys can be thinking of your questions. Hardcore versus nurturing cultures. Where are you?
I'm so glad you asked him that one. I was wondering who that was going to be.
Julia's got a good answer to this too.
Yeah, I mean, look, I really don't, I haven't seen, at least in my experience, and I've got limited experience in this, so please take this with a grain of salt, but I just don't know how a nurturing culture works in a startup environment or in any environment that is going from 0 to 1 to 10 to 100. You have to be hardcore, you have to be intense, you have to drive execution, accountability, and the people that come to work.
I don't even buy into the binary answer of that. So, I think that's a false question to say you have to be one or the other. But
yeah, I mean, look, I think also like nurturing maybe has different connotation in a startup, right? I think like if nurturing at least in our culture means providing people with the right tools to be able to be successful and supporting them and removing obstacles. I mean, Julie and I were just chatting before we jumped onto stage. Like the CEO's job really is not actually a fun job. It's probably, I spent all my life trying to be a CEO, and now that I am, I'm like, oh shit, did I really want this? But most of the time, we're removing obstacles and doing things that we don't like doing, right? And I think if we can instill a culture where our job as leadership is to remove the obstacles from people's ability to be successful, then to me that is nurturing. But if nurturing is like being, I mean, Elon Musk says this, right? In Walter Isaacson's first page, right? Is like, hey, I'm reinventing electric cars and sending rockets to Mars. You expect me to be warm and fuzzy? It's really hard to do. And look, I think once companies get mature, and I certainly saw this at Home Depot, $100 billion organization, blue chip company, yeah, lots of nurturing. Maybe too much, but not in our stage. I don't think so.
Julia, to add anything to add?
I think there is to your point, a bit of a false dichotomy in framing it that way, but also a sense. I mean, I just have not, and in my experience might be limited, this is my first company, but every single founder that I know has had to go from nothing, to build a scaled company. You don't see it. And it doesn't mean it can't be done. So I will say maybe there's a different model. You don't see anything except for being pretty hardcore. Right. And, I think for companies with limited resources, that every single dollar has to go as far as possible on incredibly tight and urgent timelines. You have to find the group of people that want to opt into that. I am the first person to say working at a startup is not and should not be for everybody. And it got over-glamorized for the last decade. And then what happened to my company was during COVID, people thought it wasn't, nobody had any clue that they were going to work for a startup because it seemed really, really big, right? And so they would join and have a really big mismatch of expectations, which was on us in bringing them in. And so we would say things like, do you want to work for a startup? And people don't actually, and they can't be expected to know what that means if they haven't done it before. It's our jobs to try to map the qualities to what we need, but it's not really, like my company would not be successful if we tried to map towards how big companies operate. We would have gone out of business a long time ago. And for me personally, I built a company. I love to work. I've always loved to work. I work, my hobby, I have 2 kids and I work. That's all I do and I love it. That is not the expectation that I put on my team. However, when I started having people tell me that I couldn't work because other people couldn't see me working, then I actually felt like I was having my own, my passion for what I wanted to do being taken away from me. And so I think that you have to be able to accommodate a lot of different working styles, but ultimately, if you're not really committed to what a startup entails, then it's a very unique environment, and it's very difficult. And I don't think it's for everybody, and I don't think it has to be.
Yeah, one thing we've started doing, actually, it's a cool thing. So anybody that I've hired in our leadership team, I actually call them the day before they're about to accept their offer, and I call them around 10:30 at night. And the tone of the call is, here are all the reasons why you shouldn't come work for us. Yep. And you should talk to your family and set the expectation, yep. And I don't want to bait and switch you. And before you say yes, just really think about this. And the people that have ultimately opt-in have been the best hires I've ever made. Yep. And some people have actually opted out, and it sucked because we went through the whole process, but it was the right thing at the end of the day.
I'm taking that one from Omair. Like that's really, really good.
We have 2, Chris, who's got the mic?
Really good.
Go ahead. Right here.
Hi. First of all, congratulations to all 3 of you, and I applaud your work, and I'm a customer of Everly, so thank you for what you do. I think words matter, though, and there are 3 words that I've heard that I'm just struggling a little bit with: hardcore, nurturing, and meritocracy. And I work at 2 startups. I have 2 startups that I've had in my past. I think when we have to define hardcore and what you guys mean by that, because I would say, being a consultant most of my life or being at Apple, if hardcore is you really got to commit, you're all in, and you're not a little bit pregnant, get it. You're all into your job. I get that. But hardcore to me means something emotionally and psychologically different. So I don't know if you mean that. Nurturing, providing the tools, the environment in which somebody can be successful, yeah, that works, because otherwise they'll leave, right? And I struggle with the word meritocracy because there is no such thing. When you're talking about race and gender, when you cross the line of an organization, there's already a pecking order. And so while I think the ideals of meritocracy are really great, we just have to be conscious of the fact that it's never existed for anyone who is in a marginalized community. And so crossing the threshold of an organization, we have to be careful how we use that word and what we intend by it. So. Yeah. Sorry.
Do you mind if
there wasn't a question?
Respond?
I kind of want you guys to respond to that.
Yeah, but let me just respond really quickly. So meritocracy means that they've gone through the exact same process, and it's not about a quota for me. It's that they are as good as any other employee at data.world, and it's really important that they know that, because if they don't know that, then I actually think it's dehumanizing to them. Like, I think if they think I was hired because I'm this race or I'm this gender or whatever, versus I kick ass and I went through the same process and I like blew them away in the presentation and everything else. But you have to have the pipeline. And if you don't have the pipeline, you're not going to end up with diversity.
So I think we've got a sensitivity to language, and we've got a perspective articulated. I'm going to go on to the second question, so you just get your questions on.
I do want to just quickly, I think this is important because I think there is to me, meritocracy. So I'm a first generation immigrant from Pakistan. I moved here when I was 16 years old, didn't go to Ivy League school. If you would have searched for me in the places most companies look for, they would have never found me, right? I think to Brett's point about the pipeline, that's the single most important thing. And what I mean by that is you have to go to places where people like me exist. And you have to just kind of remove the lenses of like, I'm only going to go to the top 10 schools to go recruit for my engineering team. And in those schools now, you have to go pick up the top 1%. That's where meritocracy comes into play, right? I think what happens a lot is you go to these places and then you fill in a quota, which is the wrong thing to do. And if it was just a quota, I wouldn't have been picked because it was random or lottery-based, right? So I think the pipeline point is even more important than meritocracy. And then on your point about hardcore, look, hardcore should not and does not mean toxic. Like, I mean, trust me, right? Like, that is not something that anybody enjoys. Hardcore is just about having the ability to set the right expectations and holding people accountable to do them. And if they're not doing them, then not giving them 17 chances to figure it out, right? And that's really all.
Can I give one thing on hardcore? So take your favorite sporting event, anything, they won, whatever it is, like the Super Bowl or whatever it is. They will talk about in that moment that there was a tremendous amount of love on the team, but it was the hardest thing they ever did in their lives. And things that are worth remembering for the rest of your life are really hard. And taking a company from 0 to over $1 billion is really, really, really hard. It's a pressure cooker. It is a lot easier to go work for a big company. And part of the reason why a lot of people don't work out that go from big companies into startup land is that they're used to people at Thanksgiving saying, wow, you work for Procter & Gamble, or you work for, whatever big name, you must be really smart. When you say you work for Cart.com or you work for data.world, maybe not Everly Health because she's a pretty well-known brand, but it wasn't always like that. They say, are you okay? Because you may be about to fail, right? But you're not going to get that reaction if you work for Google or something like that.
Thank you, guys.
That's tough.
We're 3 minutes over, but thank you so much. Really, really helpful.
Thank you.